All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Awesome. Well, today we're taking a look at the world of international trade.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah, it's gonna be good, I promise. We're going deep, deep, deep on the U.S. trade deficit.
Okay.
Like when a country imports way more than it exports.
Right, right.
We've got this, I think, really fascinating analysis. It's by a Spanish-speaking commentator. And,
Okay.
well, they're looking at how the deficit, this U.S. trade deficit, has shifted under Trump and Biden.
Oh, interesting. So, like, comparing and contrasting those two presidencies.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It's cool because it's not just about the numbers.
Right,
It
yeah.
gets into all this stuff about, like economic policy and like global power dynamics, even some like political drama, you know?
For sure. Yeah, that sounds fascinating.
It really does. And the commentator kind of starts off by focusing on how they think Biden's trade policies have led to like this ballooning trade deficit. They say that back in November 2025, the U.S. trade deficit was it was a massive $102.9 billion.
Whoa, okay. That's a big number.
Right. And they're saying that's like almost double what it was under Trump.
Double. Wow. So, like, way, way higher.
Yeah. So, like, what numbers are they using to back that up,
Well, they're saying that during Trump's presidency, the monthly deficit was usually around, like, $50 to $60 billion, something like that.
Okay.
But under Biden, it's been, like, consistently over $100 billion.
Consistently. Wow.
Yeah, they also talk about the yearly total. So under Trump, it was $578 billion in 2018,
Okay.
$626 billion in 2020.
Gotcha.
Then under Biden, it jumped up to $858 billion in 2021.
Wow.
Then $971 billion in 2022.
Huge.
And they're projecting like $890 to $900 billion for 2023.
Oh my gosh. So it just keeps going up and up and up.
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
Okay. So those are some serious numbers.
Yeah.
But is that all they're like basing this claim on?
Well, they also mentioned something pretty interesting. They say that during Trump's presidency, the U.S. made about $300 billion from tariffs.
Hold on. Before we go any further, can we like define a tariff just so everybody's on the same page?
Oh, yeah, totally. So basically, a tariff is just a tax on imported goods.
Okay. So this commentator's saying that Trump put these tariffs in place.
Right.
And they brought in all this extra money.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that also make imported goods like more expensive?
Yeah, that's the usual argument against tariffs.
Right.
But this commentator is suggesting that sometimes the other countries actually end up eating the cost of those tariffs
Oh, interesting.
just so they can keep selling their stuff in the U.S. market.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so the U.S. consumers might not even see the price go up that much.
Okay, that's interesting. But it kind of makes me wonder, like, why should we, the listeners, why should we care about this whole trade deficit thing? Like, I'm no economist, you know what I mean?
That's a good question. It's important because these big trade deficits, they can actually affect everyone, not just economists.
Okay.
Like, they can cause our national debt to go way up. They can make the U.S. more dependent on other countries, like financially.
Right.
They could even weaken the value of the dollar, like our money could be worth less.
Oh, wow.
And then there's the impact on jobs and industries, like right here in the U.S.
Oh, okay. So this isn't just about, like, abstract numbers then.
No, not at all.
There are real-world consequences.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And this commentator, they're really worried about the U.S. playing on what they call an uneven playing field.
Oh, okay.
We're saying that the U.S. is super open to imports from other countries, but other countries like China, India, Brazil, Russia, they all have these trade barriers in place.
So they're saying it's like a double standard, kind of.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And that's where they bring back this idea about tariffs. Like, they think tariffs can help counteract those barriers and make things more fair.
Okay. I'm starting to see where they're coming from. But earlier you mentioned something about tariffs causing trade wars.
Right.
And creating tension between countries, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's always a risk.
It seems like both approaches have some downsides.
Yeah, there are definitely trade-offs to consider.
So what else did this commentator have to say about how Trump and Biden's approaches to trade were different?
Well, they're really critical of Biden's policies. They think they've just led to this huge increase in the trade deficit and haven't done enough to, protect American workers and businesses.
Right.
Like, they point out that even though Biden kept a lot of Trump's tariffs and even, added some new ones,
Yeah.
he also, in their view, created this whole environment where American companies were facing more regulations and higher taxes and all this stuff.
So they're saying that Biden's policies are kind of like making it harder for American companies to compete.
Right.
But at the same time, like letting all these foreign goods into the U.S. market.
Yeah.
So that would obviously make the trade deficit even worse, right?
Yeah, that's exactly their argument.
Okay.
And they're contrasting this with what they see as Trump's approach, much more aggressive, what people call protectionism.
Can you explain what protectionism is? Like, I've heard the term, but I don't really get it.
Yeah, sure. So protectionism is basically about, like, shielding domestic industries from foreign competition,
Okay.
like protecting American businesses from, companies overseas.
Okay.
It can involve stuff like tariffs, quotas, subsidies.
Right.
And this commentator seems to think that Trump's approach, at least in the short term, it did help reduce the trade deficit
Okay.
and also brought in a bunch of revenue through those tariffs.
Right, but didn't that also lead to all those trade tensions and, geopolitical clashes and stuff that we were talking about earlier?
Exactly, yeah. Like, there are always downsides, right, to every approach.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like both approaches have, their pros and cons.
Yeah, definitely. There are always trade-offs and, like, unintended consequences you have to think about.
Right.
And this is where the commentator makes this really interesting point. They're like, okay, so the U.S. trade deficit is increasing.
Yeah.
But the U.S. is also this huge oil producer, like producing millions of barrels of oil a day.
Oh, okay. That is interesting.
Yeah, they say it's like 14 million barrels a day.
Wow, I wouldn't have thought those two things would, go together. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
why would the U.S. have this big trade deficit if it's producing that much oil?
Well, they tie this into what's happening right now, with all this stuff going on in the world. They're specifically criticizing European countries, especially Spain,
Oh, okay.
for increasing their imports of Russian gas while actually reducing their imports of U.S. gas.
So they're saying that the U.S. could maybe, balance out that trade deficit by exporting more of its own energy, right?
Exactly. And this is a perfect example of how everything's connected, like economics, energy policy, geopolitics.
Right.
You can't really understand one without thinking about the others.
It's all a big web.
Yeah, it totally is.
And that kind of reminds me of something else the commentator said. They mentioned that, ideally, a world without tariffs and trade barriers would be the best.
Yeah. But they also said that countries need to have tools to protect their own interests,
Yeah.
especially when they think other countries aren't playing fair.
Right.
And they seem to see tariffs as one of those tools, particularly when you're dealing with countries that are, really dependent on trade with the U.S.
So it's kind of like they believe in free trade, in theory, but also recognize that sometimes you got to be more strategic.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
They're not, totally protectionist, but they're also not saying free trade is always the answer.
Right.
It's more nuanced than that.
Yeah. It seems like this whole conversation comes down to, what is the right balance between free trade and protectionism?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? And it's not an easy one to answer. There are good arguments on both sides.
It's pretty amazing, we started with just this one number, a $102.9 billion trade deficit.
Yeah.
And now we're having this whole conversation about economic policy and global power and, the philosophy of trade,
It really shows how even something that seems simple, like an economic statistic, can actually open up all these complex issues.
Yeah.
And it's so important for all of us to understand these issues, even if we're not economists.
Totally. So let's bring it back to you, the listener. What are your thoughts on all this? So we've heard what this commentator thinks about trade deficits, tariffs, and how Trump and Biden approach things differently.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting discussion.
But now we want to hear from you. What do you think is the right approach? Should we just have completely free trade, no barriers, no tariffs?
Or maybe you think those strategic tariffs that the commentator was talking about, maybe those are the way to go.
Yeah. Or maybe you've got a totally different idea, something else entirely.
It's a tough question for sure.
Yeah.
There's no easy answer here.
Definitely not.
But it's worth thinking about, because it affects all of us.
Oh, absolutely.
Even if we don't always realize it, the clothes we wear, the food we eat, the gas we put in our cars.
Right. It's all connected to trade, to this global economy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the next time you see a headline about trade or tariffs, don't just ignore it.
Yeah. Take a second to think about it.
Remember what we talked about today. Maybe do some more research on your own.
Form your own opinion.
Because at the end of the day, economics, it really is everyone's business.
In this globalized world, it really is.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the U.S. trade deficit.
I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, we took you on a bit of a whirlwind tour there through numbers, policies, global power dynamics, all that fun stuff.
Hopefully you're leaving with a little better understanding of how the global economy works.
And maybe you'll even look at those headlines a little differently now. Yeah, that'd be great.
Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
See you next time.